The black belt instructor called a mother in an old hoodie onto the mat, just for fun, but less than 5 minutes later he was sprawled out on the floor, and the entire dojo stood frozen in silence. No one knew that this woman had once been a storm. It's just that she had chosen silence for the past 13 years. Before we begin today's story, if you believe that calmness, control, and self-respect can sometimes be more powerful than any punch, then you're in the right place. Thank you for being part of a community of over 25,000 people who appreciate stories of inspiration, justice, and humanity. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button to join us on the next journeys, where ordinary people can still make the world stop and listen. Now let's step into the story where a quiet woman carried the strength of a legend and made an entire dojo stand still in silence. Laura Bennett pushed open the heavy glass door of Iron Path Dojo, her worn sneakers squeaking softly on the polished wooden floor. The air inside was thick with the smell of sweat, tiger balm, and the taut energy of a place where laziness had no room. Her eyes swept the space quickly, searching for a familiar face. "I'm over here, Mom," Emily called out, waving from the far end of the green mat, where she was practicing a form with 3 other teens. Laura smiled quietly, tucking a silver strand of hair behind her ear. She sat down on the bench along the wall, wearing a faded cream hoodie and simple black leggings. At nearly 40, Laura had learned that you didn't need to dress up to be worthy. She pulled out her phone, intending to check some online cake orders on the app, but the sharp calls from the far end of the mat made her pause. There stood Sean McAllister, the head instructor of the dojo, leading the advanced class with a commanding voice. The black belt wrapped around his snow-white GI seemed to symbolize total confidence. "Hire Jenkins. My grandma kicks harder than that." A few students giggled, unsure if from fear or genuine amusement. Laura watched more closely. Sean's technique wasn't bad, movements clean and precise, but something about his teaching style unsettled her. She'd met this kind before, skilled enough to be dangerous, but too arrogant to ever keep learning. "Sensei Sean's really strict," one mother whispered to another, "but my son got his brown belt faster than at the old place. He knows how to make an impression," the other replied, eyes darting toward Sean as he adjusted a student's posture with a grip that seemed a bit too rough. 20 minutes later, Emily ran over to her mother, cheeks flushed from exertion. "Done, Mom. I'll grab my water bottle and then we can go." "Sure, how was practice today?" Laura asked, standing to help her daughter gather her things. "Great. Sensei Sean taught us a new form. He said I might test for green belt next month." Laura's chest warmed with pride. Emily had once been a shy little girl, avoiding even strangers' gazes, and now her daughter could bow, defend herself, and start believing in her own strength. Every early morning baking session and every late evening dojo run had been worth it. But just as the two were about to leave, Sean's booming voice cut through the chatter. "Before we wrap up today, how about we watch a fun little demo?" The entire dojo fell silent. All eyes turned to the man standing in the center of the mat. Laura felt a subtle discomfort rising in her stomach. Sean scanned the room, then stopped, right where she stood. His smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "I think we need a vivid example of why regular people shouldn't mess with trained professionals." Some students exchanged confused glances. This wasn't part of the usual class routine. "Let's go, Mom," Emily whispered, squeezing her mother's hand tightly. Sean stepped toward them, each footfall deliberately loud against the mat. Parents nearby started to look uneasy. "Hello there," he said loudly. "Haven't had the chance to greet you before. You're Emily's mom, right?" "Yes," Laura replied, voice calm though her eyes were watchful. "Ever thought about learning martial arts?" Sean tilted his head as if genuinely curious. "No, I haven't," she answered, trying to keep her tone light. "Come on, you've never watched an action movie and wondered, could I do that?" He raised his eyebrows, the grin on his face edging into mockery. A few quiet chuckles echoed. Laura noticed some adults turning away. "Not really," she said. "And we're about to leave. Emily has homework." But Sean wasn't done with his joke. He bent slightly forward, lowering his voice to seem friendly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have a better idea. Just a tiny little demo, a friendly spar, to show everyone the difference between someone trained and someone not." Emily's face drained of color. "Sensei Sean, my mom." "It's okay, honey," Laura interrupted, voice light as air. Sean clapped his hands loudly. "Perfect. Don't worry, Ms. Bennett, I'll be gentle. I wouldn't want to hurt someone who's never thrown a punch." His words dropped into silence like a stone hitting still water. The dojo's energy shifted. Some students looked embarrassed. Others, mostly teens, seemed eager for a spectacle. "This isn't necessary," Laura said, her tone unchanged. "Oh, but it is," Sean replied, spreading his arms. "People watch movies and think they're tough. Time to show them some reality." In that moment, something changed in Laura's eyes. Not anger, but a chilling stillness, the kind she had kept buried for over a decade. Sean McAllister stood in the center of the mat, arms crossed, as if he'd just won a grand prize in a psychological game only he was playing. His wide, smug grin made the air in the dojo grow heavy. Laura Bennett remained standing silent. She glanced around the room, catching awkward stares, stolen glances, and the barely restrained excitement of a few teenagers eager to watch a fun match. She turned to Emily, grasping her daughter's hand. That small palm was slick with sweat. Emily shook her head, eyes brimming, whispering almost pleadingly, "Please don't, Mom. You don't have to do this. Let's just go." Laura smiled gently, her eyes tender. Sometimes, sweetheart, a bully needs to be reminded that strength doesn't just come from muscles. She turned to face Sean. Her small shoulders seemed suddenly straighter. Her voice rang out clear, not loud or harsh, yet everyone heard. "One condition." Sean raised an eyebrow, entertained. "Oh, and what might that be?" "Miss Baker, when this is over, you'll apologize to your students. Publicly." The air thickened. A few students looked around uneasily. Some parents began shaking their heads, worried, but Sean burst into laughter, sharp and echoing through the dojo. "Apologize. You'll be apologizing to the mat after I flatten you." Laura said nothing. She calmly removed her worn hoodie, revealing lean arms, defined, toned and tight like someone who never stopped training. The faint calluses on her knuckles spoke louder than any words. "You don't have to do this, Mom," Emily whispered again, but Laura only gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "This isn't to prove anything. I'm just correcting the lesson." She stepped slowly onto the mat. The weariness in her posture melted away, replaced by sure, fluid steps, like each one was a breath, a return to a part of herself that had slept far too long. Sean didn't notice. He was too busy adjusting his belt, throwing kicks into the air to warm up the energy, like the lead actor in a show he'd written and directed himself. "All right, everyone, gather up. This is gonna be fun," he called out, turning to his students. What Sean and everyone else in the room didn't know was that Laura Bennett once had another name, a name that had made opponents tread carefully in the ring. Laura Shin, three-time champion of the freestyle combat circuit, known in the underground martial arts world as the Silent Storm because she never talked much, but when she fought, the world seemed to shatter in silence. She retired abruptly at 25, not because of loss, not due to injury, but because the man she loved, her boyfriend, also her training partner, died in a car crash on his way to watch her championship match. The accident happened the night before the national finals. Since then, Laura vanished. She took her mother's last name, moved to another state, and vowed never to step into a ring again. For 13 years, her world had been flour, butter, sugar, and Emily's smile. But today, in front of her daughter and a man arrogant enough to mock human dignity, the Silent Storm had returned. "Ready?" Ms. Bennett Sean asked, bouncing lightly on his toes like a professional fighter warming up. Laura stood motionless in the center of the mat, but those who paid attention would see her stance had dropped feet, balanced shoulders, and wrists relaxed. Her breath was steady, her eyes narrowed as if scanning wind patterns. "Just remember," she said, her voice soft but carrying to the edge of the mat, "the strongest people often know when not to prove it." That line made Shin pause slightly. Part of him sensed something was off, but pride wouldn't let him retreat. "All right then," he replied, trying to sound casual. "Let me show you what real fighting looks like." He began with dramatic warm-ups, spinning kicks, air punches, the sound of his fists slicing through air as if he could tear space itself. Some teens looked impressed. The parents, however, were starting to feel uneasy. Laura did nothing. She simply stood there, eyes open, breathing, silent. "Hope you've said your prayers, Ms. Bennett. This might hurt a bit." Shin smirked, half joking, half threatening. A father nearby muttered, "This is going too far. What can you do? He's the instructor." And she agreed. The person next to him replied. Laura didn't hear them. She was listening to something else, the voice of her own body, the shift in gravity, sensing the micro-movements of her approaching opponent. As Shin started circling her like a cat toying with its prey, Laura slowly turned with him. She didn't chase, didn't dodge, just watched, waiting for the exact moment. "Did you take some weekend self-defense classes?" Shin chuckled, seeing she still hadn't moved. "Something like that," Laura replied softly. Shin raised his hand. She already knew where the punch would come from before he even threw it. The air inside Iron Path Dojo felt frozen as Shin McAllister finally threw his first punch. It was a right cross, a favorite among fighters, straight, fast, decisive, aimed directly at the opponent's temple. Technically, the punch was solid good, shoulder rotation, proper body torque, weight transferred forward, a strike that had left many students reeling. But this time, it hit nothing. Laura sidestepped half a step, her body tilting gently like water flowing around a rock. Shin's punch sliced through air right where her head had just been. Most people didn't even catch what had happened. All they saw was Shin suddenly stumble forward, nearly losing balance, forced to spin around. He grimaced. "Lucky shot," he muttered, adjusting his stance. "You won't dodge the next one." Laura didn't respond. She simply returned to her central stance, low center of gravity, feet planted like roots, hands open and relaxed, ready for anything. This time, Shin didn't hold back. He launched a quick three-strike combo jab crosshook, a basic yet highly effective sequence if delivered fast. Still, not a single hit landed. Laura seemed to turn into mist, evading each blow with the tiniest of movements. A tilt of the head, a shift of the hips, a half step to the side, a subtle slide to the right. Every motion was precise to the inch, like she was dancing with the wind of his punches. The chatter in the dojo had completely died. No more laughter, no more murmurs. Every eye was locked on the mat, where a mother in a worn-out tee was doing the unthinkable. Sweat began to bead on Shin's forehead. He tried to up the tempo, adding low kicks, liver shots, even a spinning back fist. But Laura evaded them all without moving far, without wasting energy. A male student whispered to his friend, "She's controlling the fight." "No," said the girl beside him, eyes glued to Laura. "She's reading it. Every move, every breath." The more he struck, the more frustrated Shin became. His anger and embarrassment were making him reckless, and in martial arts, that was poison. Laura began closing the distance after each evasion. It wasn't obvious, not at first. But with every sidestep, she drew closer. "What are you doing?" Shin growled. "Waiting for you to tire," she said softly. The air shattered. A father in the back row let out a hushed gasp. "Oh my God," Shin shouted. This time he threw a haymaker, a wide, powerful but sluggish swing, often used in desperation. Laura dipped low, gliding down like a falling leaf, and for the first time, she touched him. Just a light tap of her fingertip to his right rib, soft as a breeze. But everyone understood if she had wanted, that could have been a knee strike that shattered his chest. Shin turned, face flushed with anger and confusion. "Are you toying with me?" "No," she replied. "I'm choosing." Silence spread. The older students held their breath. They understood what the younger ones didn't. Laura wasn't just dodging, she was commanding the fight with intellect and discipline. Shin began gasping. His once powerful punches were now slow and sloppy. He growled and changed tactics. Grappling. He'd had amateur wrestling experience in college. If he couldn't win standing up, maybe he could take her down. He dropped low, initiating a double-leg takedown, lunging to wrap both her legs and slam her to the mat. But it was his biggest mistake. Laura didn't retreat to defend. She stepped forward, a move opposite of any normal fighter's instinct. And that's what made the takedown collapse. As Shin lunged in, Laura shifted half a step sideways, rotated her hips, placed her hands on his shoulder and neck, and redirected all his forward momentum straight to the floor. There was no scream, no dramatic crash, just a dull, heavy thud that echoed through the room. Shin lay face down on the mat arm, limp, silent. Everyone held their breath. Even Emily covered her mouth, worried her mother had gone too far. But Laura stood calmly, not panting, not sweating. Shin slowly pushed himself up. His face was beet red from humiliation and dizziness. "Who are you?" he panted, eyes now confused, no longer arrogant. Laura extended a hand to help him. 13 years of training before I ever stepped into this dojo," she said. Shin shook his head, refused the hand, and stood on his own. Students glanced at one another, some pulling out phones. Within seconds, the name Laura Shin popped up. Fight highlights, knockout reels. Photos of her younger self, cold, expressionless, undefeated. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but proud. "My mom used to be a 3-time champion. She's Laura Shin. She retired when I was little." A hush fell over the dojo. No one spoke, but their eyes had changed, filled with respect, reverence, and disbelief at what they'd just witnessed. The air inside Iron Path Dojo seemed vacuumed out after Emily's quiet statement, "My mom is Laura Shin." That line, that name, Laura Shin, was now glowing on dozens of phone screens held by older students. Fight highlights, photos from martial arts magazines over a decade ago, clips of knockouts in mere seconds, all confirming the unbelievable truth. The unassuming woman who had just floored the head instructor was a retired legend. Shin McAllister stood there, sweat beading on his forehead, his face flushed red from exhaustion, from shame, or both. He looked around and met the eyes of his students, some shocked, some confused, and some unmistakably disappointed. And then for the first time that afternoon, Shin lowered his head. He said hoarsely, "I owe you an apology, and I owe another one to my students." The dojo was utterly silent. Laura looked straight at him with no hint of pride or gloating. She simply gave a small nod. "You just demonstrated the strongest thing in martial arts, knowing when you're wrong." Shin swallowed hard. He turned to face the gathered students standing around the mat. Dozens of eyes followed his every move. "All of you." He began, drawing a deep breath. "Today I made a serious mistake. I let my ego outweigh my duty as a teacher. I wanted to teach a lesson in humility, and instead I became an example of arrogance." A few students gave slight nods. Some still couldn't look at him, their gaze locked on Laura, who now stood quietly like a shadow in the corner. Laura had nothing to prove, Shin continued, but she stepped onto the mat not to win, but to remind me and all of us that martial arts isn't about showing off strength. It's about controlling it. He paused, then bowed deeply before the entire dojo. "I'm sorry, all of you. I ruined today's lesson." No one clapped, but the silence that followed carried a different weight, one of silent respect, wordless understanding. Laura walked over to Emily, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. She whispered, "Let's go, sweetheart." But Emily didn't move. Her eyes shimmered, hands gripping her backpack straps tightly. "Mom, thank you. I've never seen you like that before." Laura smiled. "I've always been me. You just never saw me on the mat." Suddenly, one of the older students, likely a college freshman, stepped forward. "Ms. Laura, would you maybe teach us sometime? I mean, if you have time, any technique, anything at all. A wave of nods followed that question. The eyes weren't gleaming with thrill anymore, but filled with something deeper, as if they'd witnessed something truly real. Laura gently shook her head. I'm not part of the ring anymore. I'm just a mom and a bakery owner now, but you still kept it all. A younger girl said quietly, all the technique, all the control. I kept it so I wouldn't lose respect for myself, Laura replied. Martial arts isn't in the punch, it's in the choice not to throw it when you can. Again the room fell silent, words so simple yet etched deeply into the minds of those teenagers who had once believed strength lived in speed and impact. Shin slowly walked up to the mother and daughter. If you don't mind, he said, voice sincere, I hope you'll come by again. Not to teach, but to share. These kids need to see this. And I need it too. Laura looked at him for a long moment. She'd met many like Shin before, skilled but prideful. But not everyone had the courage to admit they were wrong. This dojo is yours. I'm just passing through. But your presence changed everything, he replied quietly. Laura smiled. If you really want change, start today. Teach these kids respect not with words, but with the way you live. Shin nodded, and this time there were no jokes, no bravado. As the mother and daughter exited the dojo, people instinctively stepped aside, forming a clear path. No one was told to, but every gaze that followed them held the same emotion, admiration. A young student tugged on his friend's sleeve and whispered, from now on, I'm not calling her Emily's mom. I'm calling her Ms. Shin. His friend nodded. She's the reason I want to keep training. A week after that unforgettable afternoon, Laura Bennett's life seemed to return to normal. Each morning she still rose early to knead dough, bake almond butter cookies, and pack batches of crispy cinnamon rolls to deliver to the corner coffee shop. In the afternoon, she checked online orders, messaged regular customers, then picked up Emily from school. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside her and in the eyes of others, everything was different. Someone asked about you again, Mom, Emily said while clearing the dinner table. Laura looked up from her phone. The dojo again. Yeah. Today it was someone named Brian. Remember the curly-haired college kid from that day? Laura chuckled. Hard to forget, especially when he kept calling me sensei like it was sacred. Emily rested her chin in her hand, watching her mother. Are you going back there? Laura paused for a moment before answering. I don't know. That dojo already has a teacher. I don't want to become someone they only call when they need a special show. Emily looked at her for a long time, but that day, they didn't just watch you fight. They saw you hold back. You taught them by choosing not to strike. Laura said nothing, but her daughter was right. That afternoon, Laura had received a message from an unknown number. Thank you. That day, you didn't just make me reflect on myself. You helped me remember why I started martial arts in the first place. Shin. She stared at the message for a while, then tapped Save Contact. Not long after, Emily handed her an envelope. This came to the house, Mom. Inside was a typed letter along with a group photo. The entire student body of Iron Path Dojo, from youngest to oldest, standing in 2 rows, gathered around a handwritten whiteboard sign that read, Thank you, Ms. Shin. You reminded us why we first stepped onto the mat. Laura read the letter 3 times. That weekend, while delivering pastries to the coffee shop, she heard a voice call out from behind, Ms. Shin, Ms. Shin. It was one of the younger students, a boy named Tommy, maybe 10 years old, with messy brown hair like a bird's nest. Sorry to bother you, but my mom said if I ever saw you again, I should say thank you. I used to be really scared of sparring, but after watching you dodge punches without hitting back, I thought, maybe I can be strong without being loud. Laura knelt to his eye level. Do you know what that means, Tommy? The boy shook his head. It means you just understood a part of martial arts that many adults never do. Tommy grinned and held out a black rubber bracelet with embossed words, "Stillness is strength." "My friends and I made these, will you keep it?" Laura took it and slipped it onto her left wrist. She said nothing, but her eyes shimmered. That evening in their small kitchen, Laura sat with Emily. Outside the window, the night wind rustled through the trees. "Mom," Emily asked softly, "were you sad when you had to leave the ring back then?" Laura sat quietly for a moment. Her mind wandered back to packed stadiums, bright white lights, the roar of crowds, the smell of leather gloves, the weight of a golden trophy in her hands. "Yes," she answered honestly. "I was sad for a long time, but later I understood. I didn't give up my strength. I just learned how to hold it." Emily smiled, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. "I think that day everyone understood that." A week later, Iron Path Dojo officially announced a new class, an advanced martial philosophy course for older students, focusing on discipline control and defense. The lead instructor, Sean McAllister, with a closing note in the announcement. "This class is inspired by Ms. Laura Shin, the Silent Storm." Laura saw the news through Emily's social media post. She didn't comment. She simply looked out at the backyard where the night wind passed through her small lavender garden, moonlight slipping over the porch. The world might no longer know who she was, but she knew sometimes to change an entire room, you don't need to shout or strike. You only need to stand still at the right moment. And so the story of Laura Bennett, or rather Laura Shin, comes to a close. From an ordinary mother mocked as a joke, she made an entire dojo fall silent, not with punches, but with the calm control and quiet pride of a true warrior. If this story touched you about humility, inner strength, and the real lessons of martial arts, please hit like and subscribe. We'll continue bringing you stories that are just moving and surprising, where seemingly ordinary people do the extraordinary. While you wait for the next video, I've left a few more stories right here, and I believe you won't want to miss them. Wishing you a peaceful day. And if the world ever underestimates you, I hope you'll remember you don't need to shout. You just need to stand your ground.